So we've discussed at length the rebuilding of Iraq and specifically the U.S. building up the Iraqi army. Well, come to find out the situation is even worse than we thought. We know that a few months ago, the Iraqi army literally dropped their guns and ran away from 900 ISIS fighters. And remember, there were thousands of Iraqi forces there, and they dropped their weapons and ran from 900 guys. So this was a bizarre circumstance, and something was going on where there's just flat out not the will to fight if you're acting like that when you have this tremendous numerical advantage. But now we learn something worse. Quote, according to a new investigation, the Iraqi army has been paying salaries to at least 50,000 soldiers who don't exist, and possibly many, many more. A conservative estimate puts the loss at $380 million a year for the so-called ghost soldiers who experts believe officers put on the books in order to pocket the $600 or more that a soldier earns each month. Whoa. So you're paying for this. The American taxpayer is paying for this. Furthermore, 4 of the 14 divisions of the Army collapsed. At least 30,000 Iraqi soldiers refused to fight. And now, quote, White House budget officials said that they would request an additional $1.6 billion to train and equip Iraqi troops as part of a $5 billion operation to combat ISIS. So understand exactly what's happening here. We already spent $25 billion to build up the forces in Iraq. And what happens when they needed to fight? They ran away. They all said, no, we don't want to fight, and they left. $25 billion totally wasted. So what's the answer from Washington when they look not only at the fact that we blew $25 billion, the Iraqi army doesn't want to fight, but also that they're robbing us. They're paying 50,000 people who don't exist. In other words, they're pocketing the salary for 50,000 more soldiers, and they're getting rich from the U.S. taxpayer for doing nothing, for running away from ISIS. But what's Washington's genius response? Give them another $1.6 billion, please. Okay, this is like a Benny Hill sketch, is what it is. I mean, this is like, what am I watching Chappelle Show right now? Is this an SNL skit? Is this an old school Mad TV sketch? Seriously? No, but you have to understand something, guys. Yes, this show, sure, I give opinion and I'll rant about things, and sometimes I'm admittedly very biased on certain issues. But the things that I just laid out for you right there, they are stone cold facts. Stone cold Steve Austin facts. Think about it. Okay, I'll go through the numbers one more time. At least 30,000, at least I'm being incredibly conservative with that number, 30,000 Iraqi soldiers refused to fight. U.S. taxpayers are funding 50,000 non-existent Iraqi soldiers. $380 million a year we're blowing on that alone. We spent $25 billion to build up the military to begin with, and they dropped their guns and ran from 900 ISIS fighters. $25 billion totally wasted. Their answer is give them $1.6 billion more dollars, and let's try to rebuild them even more. But they don't want to fight. Okay, to understand why the army's never going to want to fight and we're just wasting more money, you have to understand the history of Iraq. Iraq became a country in the 1930s. And you know who made the country? Britain. They drew it on a map. They drew random borders. They go, okay, well, we want the oil from this region, and this isn't a natural alliance in this region or a natural country, but we need to put in a guy who's going to be a king that just gives us the oil. So what do we, okay, I don't know, draw borders. There, boom, we're done here. You couldn't have drawn a less real country than Iraq, if that sentence makes any sense. Because you have the Kurds in the north, you have, by Iran, you have a Shiite majority, and then you have the Sunnis in another portion of Iraq. So what you have is 3 groups that fucking hate each other and want to kill each other, and they're all supposed to fight over control of this fake made-up country. That's why you're never going to get an Iraqi army that works, because who's going to be in the army? Is it going to be just the Shiites, and then they're going to repress the Kurds and the Sunnis? Or is it going to be just the Sunnis and then they'll repress the Shiites and the Kurds? Or is it going to be just the Kurds? Well, we know it's not going to be just the Kurds because they basically have set up their own de facto state called Kurdistan, where that's where they have their allegiance to, and they have a flag and everything, and they have functioning governments for themselves in those areas. So what are you going to do? If you set up an army, no matter what, it's not going to be an army that's representative of the people, and they're not fighting for a country they actually believe in, so they're not going to fucking fight. I'm not a genius. I'm just a dude. Yes, I have a political science degree, and this is the stuff I read about every day. But if anybody reads about this stuff, they'd come to the same conclusions as me. So how is it that I understand this, but the government doesn't understand this? The people in Washington don't understand this. Or maybe it's more nefarious than that. Maybe they understand it, but they don't care. Because in order to send them $1.6 billion more dollars, well, how's that going to get to them? It's going to get to them in the form of more tanks and more guns and more uniforms and more things that corporations in the U.S. have to make, and people make money off of that. Maybe that's what it really comes down to. It's just purely a military-industrial complex ruse where people continue to make money and rob us of another $1.6 billion after we wasted $25 billion, after we wasted over $6 trillion because we went into Iraq in the first place when we shouldn't have because they didn't have anything to do with 9/11. I love that too, how the original reason for going into Iraq, as sold to us by the Bush administration, was Saddam was connected to Osama bin Laden and he did 9/11, so obviously we have to go in there. So we went in there under that premise. And then what happened? We realized that's not true. Okay, were you not out by that Wednesday? Okay, we learned it's not true on a Monday. Great, get everybody out by Wednesday. Fantastic. We fucked up. Sorry, guys, our bad. No, then they just moved the goalposts. They were like, did we say because it was Osama and 9/11? No, Iraq had nothing to do with that. Something, weapons of mass destruction, whatever. And then we're like, we got to stay there. Weapons of mass destruction. But what does that even mean, weapons of mass destruction? So what? He has weapons of mass destruction? A lot of places have weapons of mass destruction. Does that mean we have to go there and fight and try to topple the government and kill people? There's a no, if he's going to use it against Iowa if we don't act now. Really? But there's no evidence of that. You just made that up. That's not true at all. You just made that up. In fact, you were an ally with Saddam Hussein not that long ago. What are you talking about? But no, we went in the country. We know the government lied to us, and then they just kept changing the reason why we're there. Then we stayed there. Now we're back in there. We broke the country. We broke the country. We wasted over $6 trillion. We created a fake military, wasted $25 billion more dollars. Now we're wasting another $1.6 billion. And this is a Democratic administration who are supposed to be better than the Republicans who just fuck up everything.